After watching about 5 minutes of the Democratic debates the other night, I turned it off. It turned into this huge dogpile and straw manning of Sanders' positions. It was absolutely ridiculous.
Do not think so. Vladimir Putin thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected so you'll lose to him.
Bernie and I both want to see universal health care, but Bernie's plan doesn't explain how to get there, doesn't show how we're going to get enough allies into it, and doesn't show enough about how we're going to pay for it. I dug in, I did the work, and then Bernie's team trashed me for it.
If you think the last 4 years has been chaotic, divisive, toxic, exhausting, imagine spending the better part of 2020 with Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. Think about what that will be like for this country.
Bernie Sanders' analysis is right. The difference is I don't like his solutions. I don't believe that a government takeover of large parts of the economy makes any sense for working people or for families.
You know, we talk about progressive. Let's talk about being progressive. Walking distance here is Mother Emanuel Church. 9 people shot dead by a white supremacist. Bernie voted 5 times against the Brady bill and wanted a waiting period. No, let me finish. And waited a waiting period of 12 hours. I'm not saying he's responsible for the 9 deaths, but that man would not have been able to get that weapon with the waiting period had been what I suggest until you are cleared.
I'm hearing my name mentioned a little bit tonight. I wonder why.
Hearing Amy say that Cubans wanted capitalism as evidence that socialism fails made me want to throw my phone. It couldn't be the economic sanctions we placed on Cuba that is slowly suffocating their government to get them to switch economic systems. Or that 70% of the population is employed by the government, so when you restrict trade, these people become the secondary targets. No. It's socialism. Or when Bernie applauds the good things Cuba has done for their people, like raising literacy rates drastically. That means Bernie is supporting the atrocities Cuba has committed in the past.
Occasionally, it might be a good idea to be honest about American foreign policy. And that includes the fact that America has overthrown governments all over the world, in Chile, in Guatemala, in Iran. And when dictatorships, whether it is the Chinese or the Cubans, do something good, you acknowledge that. But you don't have trade love letters with them.
No, because only Obama can get away with that apparently.
To President Castro in Cuba, I said, look, you've made great progress in educating young people. Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. Medical care. You know, the life expectancy of Cubans is equivalent to the United States, despite it being a very poor country, because they have access to health care. That's a huge achievement. They should be congratulated.
I have not been paying close attention to the primaries. One of the biggest reasons is that I will vote blue no matter who. But the second biggest reason is that I don't want to hear all the mudslinging and personal attacks that they will have to walk back when somebody wins the nomination. At this point, they're just feeding the right talking points to use after the primaries. It's pathetic. So why am I voting for Bernie? Is it because he's the scary Marxist socialist communist that so many people on the right and left are characterizing him as? No. It's because he's been one of the most genuine and honest candidates I've ever listened to. I believe that he wants real change for the working class of this country. We spend way more government money on corporate welfare than we do social welfare in this country, and that needs to change. If the American right thinks corporations and businesses are these magical entities that are not propped up by the government money, well, I'm sorry to tell you that just isn't the case. What if we invested more into our citizens than companies that are just going to turn around and lobby against the interests of those citizens? We basically give government subsidies to corporations that make ridiculous amount of profits for them to turn around and spend money on lobbying things that directly affect all citizens. Pollution is one of the big examples of this. Corporations fight for deregulation that ultimately increases pollution and healthcare costs of citizens. Regardless, I like Bernie's policies. Medicare for all. I generally support switching to an easier and less complex healthcare system, though I do feel that maybe we shouldn't include dental, hearing, and vision. These should be supplemental plans that one can add on through a public option or through a private insurance company. I think we could drastically simplify the medical process by switching to a single payer system. We could have it set up to where its entirety is paid through payroll taxes or a very minimal copay like $5 to $10. People would no longer have to stress about what is covered or if their plan covers all their needs. It would be a one-stop shop. No more shopping every year. No more having to worry about staying covered if one loses their job. Healthcare is there no matter what. We basically already have healthcare for all since emergency rooms must take all patients even if they can't pay. That bill is usually paid for through tax dollars in which the hospital can charge an unnegotiated amount, which increases costs to the taxpayer already. While Bernie's plan also tackles the cost of high-priced drugs, I would like to tackle the patent and generic drug issue first. I believe that reforming these areas would drastically cut costs without having to use as much government force. If the government helps pay for the research of a drug, then that drug shouldn't be protected by patents as long as drugs produced solely with corporations' own money. If citizens help fund the drug through grants, then the drug should not be protected by a patent as long. All in all, even if an individual taxes go up, they still save money on the back end by not paying premiums, not paying for bloated CEO pay, or adding, in my opinion, unethical profit margins to the practice of medicine. I pay $27,000 a year in healthcare premiums through my employer. I have a wife and 3 kids. I do have a 90% plan where I pay little in deductibles and copays, but because of the nature of my work, that is all they can offer. I also shopped on the ACA's page to find lower premiums, but I didn't find any. I also do not qualify for tax breaks through the ACA. Even if my taxes went up $15,000, I would still save over $10,000 a year. The Green New Deal. The big, scary Green New Deal that is going to morph us into Venezuela overnight. I support the Green New Deal. Not in its entirety, but for the most part, I support taking away the power of oil and gas companies. It's time for a change of power when it comes to our economy. Switching to more renewable, maybe not 100%, opens doors for individual freedom. Imagine buying a battery for your house and charging it with your own solar panels. You harvest your own energy. You can still be connected to a grid just in case you need more energy, but for the most part, you're self-dependent. Or what if your community or city joined together in a solar network to share power between all and charge a fair rate? The creation of jobs by adding a new sector to the economy would not only be jobs in urban areas, but also rural areas. Those areas where coal plants already shut down and left thousands of people with no income. It would create better outcomes for the environment and produce less pollution overall. Companies wouldn't have to worry about EPA regulations as much. Local communities wouldn't have increased healthcare costs due to pollution that can't be seen. College for all. Many public universities used to be free. It wasn't until state and federal budget cuts started to happen that they had to start charging tuition. As these cuts kept getting deeper and deeper, the individual took on more of those costs. I support public colleges being tuition free. Why? Because we should be investing as much as we can into our citizens to bring about better outcomes. I don't care if they want to take courses in underwater basket weaving. I'm not here to tell others what interests they should enjoy or that college education should be only about how you can profit off that knowledge. I care about education as an end itself. I'm not fully on board with the full cancellation of all student debt though. While the government does own most student loans, I don't think we should just cancel it. Maybe we can reduce each loan by a percentage overall and thus lower monthly payments to borrowers. I do like the idea of creating a student loan program similar to grants, but you have to pay it back. Maybe we create the initial investment of like $2 billion. When somebody applies for the loan, they pay an upfront origination fee, to be further discussed, that will keep it funded and grow while applying a flat 1% interest rate or something similar. That way, the fund keeps growing without causing too much debt to students. But this would only be for public colleges and if we don't want to offer free tuition. Workplace democracy. Before I talk about this policy, I want to make something clear. We either need to create an environment where unions are incredibly strong or increase the federal minimum wage to a living wage based upon one's geographic area. I believe that workers have the same value as bosses, managers, and CEOs. They all produce labor. While that labor may be valued more or less because of market factors, we all produce labor together. All of us working together is what keeps this economy going. Workers trade their labor to produce products and service in return to earn money that is then used to buy other products and services around the world. We all work together to make this machine turn. I support Bernie's plan to increase power of unions. Unions are what make European countries like Switzerland and the Netherlands so successful without having federal minimum wage laws. The government should not provide contracts to organizations that pay poverty wages, outsource jobs overseas, engage in union busting, deny good benefits, and pay CEOs outrageous compensation packages. Justice and safety for all. Taking profit out of the justice system seems like it should be a no-brainer. If your justice is dependent on how much money you have, then is that really justice? I support the banning of for-profit prisons and detention centers. By no means should anyone be trying to make profit off of housing people convicted of crimes. If there's profit, either prisoners are not receiving proper care in facilities, or it's just not being provided at all. If you don't support increasing the budget for public defenders, then you can't possibly talk about justice being fair. We should have a robust public defender program and have high-quality people staffing that initiative. If we only have one life to live, we should treat locking people up for violations of the law very seriously. We should be looking at our criminal justice system to rehabilitate and not just punishment. We should decriminalize all drugs and legalize marijuana. We also need to take a look at policing in general overall. We need to reform how our police officers are trained and how much time they spend in certain aspects of policing. Free child care and pre-K for all. I do believe pre-K should be government funded. Pre-K not only allows parents to unlock their earning potential by giving them time to work or pursue higher education, it's an immense benefit to the children. It helps children learn how to grow and interact with others at an earlier age and develop with other kids in their age range. Free childcare is where I back off a bit. Childcare is extremely expensive, and I do believe we should be finding ways to decrease the cost of childcare and increase the supply. But I feel that parents should have to pay something, have their skin in the game. Maybe we can subsidize childcare more broadly for those who can't afford it. Tax on extreme wealth. Billionaires should not exist when the majority of the world is in poverty. Period. I believe taxation is an effective way to capture the total productivity of a nation and make sure that everybody enjoys the prosperity that the nation has. I support higher taxes that increase the effective marginal tax rate. If you don't know what that means, it's basically after all the loopholes are applied, this will be the percentage they actually pay. High-speed internet for all. This policy is way overdue. If you don't support this, then you should look at how we electrified rural areas in America. The free market failed. Companies knew that laying infrastructure to a few farmers in rural areas would not be profitable, so they chose not to. It took the government to step in and provide this infrastructure for rural areas to have electricity. While some of the measures they used did hurt some Americans, like claiming land for the building of hydroelectric dams and man-made lakes, this ultimately increased the productivity of rural farmers and helped rural Americans be more productive. High-speed internet isn't available everywhere because companies will not build the infrastructure. They won't make enough money off the business from rural areas. This handicaps rural Americans from building businesses and connecting to the world. I don't agree with building the infrastructure and then turning it over to private companies so that they can then make money off citizens. I do support more publicly owned internet service providers. In my area of Georgetown, Texas, we only have one ISP, Suddenlink. They get away with having a monopoly because of a loophole in the law that states as long as different forms of internet connection are available, then it's no problem. These other forms, satellite and wireless, with speeds that are less than 40 MPS and cost up to $70 a month. It's terrible. If Georgetown created their own infrastructure, it would break up the monopoly Suddenlink enjoys on broadband and fiber. I wouldn't care so much about them being a monopoly if their services were impeccable, but it's not. This is literally local control at its best. Free and fair elections. I agree with taking money out of politics, but Knowing Better did a really good breakdown on why this isn't as easy as it seems. So in theory, I agree with it, but in practice, I have no idea how to do it. Regardless, we should be ending gerrymandering. We should make Election Day a national holiday. How is it one of the most important aspects of being a citizen isn't supported with a holiday? One where we celebrate having a voice and the opportunity to vote. Furthermore, I also believe we should remove as many barriers to voting as possible. From my time working in the elections division, online voting is completely feasible and can be done safely, but our fear of hacking and people stuffing the ballots or cheating makes us believe that local control is the best, even though that shit still happens and with less oversight. Legalize marijuana. Enough said. Legalize it, tax it, and use that revenue to create drug outreach programs and help reduce the factors that lead to drug abuse. Now, I don't agree with Bernie on all things. One of my biggest problems with him is his stance on unions. I love the idea of unions. Strong unions is why many European countries do not need federal minimum wage laws. However, I do not like protecting jobs for the sake of jobs. If we can use technology to make these jobs better, more efficient, and remove the need for human labor, that is where we should be headed. The end goal of technology is to reduce work for more free time. However, the system we built requires people to work in order to live. The system itself hampers our ability to progress into new aspects of building a society together. From that same token, I don't like his jobs for all guarantee. Federal jobs are extremely expensive on the taxpayer. We will be just subsidizing rural Americans for the most part, subsidizing companies and corporations who don't bring work out to those areas, which brings me to a bigger picture. The rural versus urban divide. There really is two Americas at this point. I'm not speaking North and South or Democrat or Republican, but rural versus urban. They are incredibly different, and a solution to one may have the complete opposite reaction in the other. For example, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. For bigger urban areas that have a lot of economic activity, this could work and help improve the living situations of those around it. But if we applied this to a truck stop town out in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, it would hurt their local economy. A business there may not actually be able to provide that wage because a decent wage to the business owner, keep prices low, pay all their taxes, and stay in business. It could force a lot of rural businesses to close and thus making the situation in rural America even worse. Another example would be gun control legislation. What may work in urban areas where police are more readily available may not work for somebody out in the middle of nowhere with little law enforcement. Ever since the election of Trump, I've been thinking about this urban-rural divide a lot. It's not something we can just brush off. Rural communities are suffering, and I don't want to implement policies that will make them suffer even more. That's not the point of government. I want to make this very clear. I will vote blue no matter who. Not because I care about Democrats, but because I care about leftist ideas more broadly. I am not a Bernie fanboy either. I really like Bernie Sanders, but he is a politician, and there is only so much one politician can do while in office. He will not get half the shit done, even with 4 years in office. The backlash at midterms will drive out Republican voters afraid of communism and dictatorship, assuming he wins the primaries and the presidency. Beyond his policies, I want to make this also extremely clear. My vote for getting Bernie in the White House is also strategical. I feel that the Overton window in the United States is entirely too far right. The fact that Bernie's policies are considered radical, even with most of the Democratic Party, is sad. Because at most, Bernie still supports reforming capitalism through the system of taxation. I have not seen in any of his policies call for the complete transfer of workplaces to the workers, only partial ownership, or the abolishment of all private property. When I see memes and commentary that describe Bernie, such as the it really pisses me off because it's so far from the truth that it's not even funny. In fact, a lot of the criticism of the right and left are almost hilarious. I hear many veterans talk about Bernie being a draft dodger for claiming conscientious objection status during the Vietnam War, but still advocating for other wars. Listen, one can be against serving in Vietnam and advocate for other wars that they deem justified without being a hypocrite. Or how Bernie supporters treat other Democrats. Really? Who the fuck cares? Just don't engage with them? These people even get on my nerves, but I'm not going to let a bunch of militant yet impassioned supporters sway my view of the candidate, unless he was backed by Nazis. All this shit talking now about Bernie Sanders from the people on the left will hurt Democrats' chances of winning the White House if he wins the primaries. They will have to backtrack so much in order to start building a strong left coalition. Listen, if the libertarians, Christian fundamentalists, alt-right, white supremacists, and Republicans can all band together to elect Trump, we can all band together to elect whoever the Democratic nominee is. Leave your gatekeeping at the door, and let's build a strong leftist movement together. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you liked the new video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm trying to get up to 500 followers, but thank you for everybody that's been supporting me along the way. Also, if you'd like to debate or stream sometime, let me know. I'm always down to have a conversation. All right, guys, take it easy.